Good morning, everyone. I am Benjamin Vedrenne-Cloquet. I'm CEO and co-founder of Edxus Group, and I'm also co-founder of EdTech Europe, together with IBIS Capital. Before we start, let me just start with by confessing something. I'm not really an expert in digital education, and I'm afraid at this stage it's too late to ask for a refund. I worked most of my life in media, and I've seen there and experienced there the full effect of an industry being disrupted by digitalization. And I'm seeing fascinating parallels between what digitalization has done in the media industry and what it's doing right now in the education world. And I think, drawing upon this, it's easy to predict what is going to be the pattern of disruption in education as a result of digitalization, and also to try to identify where to play, either as an investor, as an incumbent, or as an innovator. So I guess what I'm telling you, I'm not really an expert in digital education, but I've seen this happening before. And before we listen to the true specialists and the real innovators, I just want to share my perspective on how I see the education world being in the trail of the digital media world. So my core prediction is the following. Media and education industries will experience the same pattern of disruption. And the reason is, when you think of it, education is very similar to media. It's about creating content, engaging audience, and measuring outcomes. And those very three areas are those disrupted by digitalization. If you look at the first one, on the content side, the first effect really of digitalization is the provision of new content and the emergence of new platforms. And I don't know if you remember this, probably not, but that's the first video ever posted on YouTube. It was back in 2005. This person here is one of the founders of YouTube, and this video is called Me at the Zoo. 12 months later, there was 65,000 videos posted a day and more than 100 million video views a day on YouTube. Well, I think that compares quite well to this, if that works, which is, and Charles talked about him a bit earlier, Mr. Khan, one man, one computer, and now more than 10 million students. And I don't know if you remember at the time, but the typical reaction from industry insiders about YouTube was, well, it has massive audience, but actually it's poor user-generated content, and it will never monetize. And I think the question is, are we living a YouTube moment in education? And if you look at the MOOCs, so we talk about the MOOCs. So the MOOCs are those massive online open courses, so universities posting and publishing their courses online and getting 10K, 20K, 30K students from all over the world. They are a YouTube moment in the sense that they generate mass audience. The criticism in the industry about MOOCs is the same. We think that people say that the student dropout is quite heavy, that the quality of content is sometimes questionable, and that the monetization of the business models are unproven. And I think that's true in some extent, but I think it is missing the point entirely. And the point is that MOOCs in itself are a formidable breakthrough moment in terms of consumer adoption, and this in two ways. One, they convert mass audience to new forms of content and new ways of getting educated. And second, we see 20,000, 30,000, 50,000 students sometimes. And the level of audience and the level of interactions are such that we already foresee the formation of digital learning communities. And the prediction here is that digital education, or MOOCs, will lead us to social education the same way digital media led us to social media. So yes, it's a YouTube moment. And if you push the comparison further, you can say it's an Amazon moment as well. I don't know if you remember, but in the book industry, Amazon was basically a massive shift because in 10 years, the numbers of books published have been multiplied by 50. in 10 years, from 300,000 to 15 million books registered with this ISBN code. And that's typically the effect of digitalization. And we see this trend already happening in the digital educational material. And the prediction here is that that will create, or that will lead to a total inversion of bargaining powers between publishers and content owners. And that will create huge downward pressure on the pricings of content publishers. So YouTube moment, Amazon moment, but also iTunes moments, replace a playlist by personalized curriculum, and you get an idea of how the players in the industry will have to adapt to new revenue model and micro revenue model. And if you push the comparison further, it's also a Netflix moment, taking into consideration that one of the drivers for using MOOCs is actually, especially in the US, to save on tuition cost, exactly the same way Netflix, for example, grew out of TV consumers being tired of paying very high cable TV fees. And we were calling them the cord cutters, and I think the MOOCs users are the tuition cutters. So that's a parallel between distribution media platforms and MOOCs. And the prediction here is that it's probably in this very specific space going to be what we call a winner-take-all market, with very few dominating platforms in the future, and a lot of fight and a lot of pain in the content arena. So that was on the content side. Now, on the audience side, what digitalization does usually is create fragmentation. And if you take the example of the K-12 market, so primary education, we were before living in a very simple world. One teacher, one blackboard. In the media world, it's called one platform, one source of content, one source of audience. And the game here is basically to reach mass audience. That's what we see happening now in education, and especially in the K-12 market. I mean, you might have heard of this initiative, Bring Your Own Device, which is encouraging kids to bring their own phones and tablets in the classroom. And if you think about it, kids also now have many opportunities to source different type of education from different sources. They have apps, they have podcasts, they have video content, ebooks on all type of different tablets. And that really creates what we call fragmentation. More sources of content, more devices, and fragmentation. And that's a very, very different game for teachers, because that creates a switch from reach to engagement. The challenge here is not to reach anymore the classroom. It's not anymore to reach students, but it's to engage them in a fragmented world. So, the question is, what does fragmentation of audiences means from a business standpoint for educational publishers and education players? Well, that means fragmentations of revenues. And to push the parallel with the media industry, just want to quote one of the former CEO of Time Warner, who said one day, well, imagine 1,000 buckets on the floor, all catching little raindrops of revenue. That's what Time Warner will look like in the future. What that means is, well, our business model was mono-platform, reaching mass audience, and we were making a lot of money out of that. And this world is changing, and we need to be a multi-platform, multi-content, multi-device content companies if we want to have a fighting chance to defend our market share. And although he was very right about this, and he was visionary about this, the reality, not only at Time Warner, but at all media giants, is that from an operational standpoint, they are still struggling to adapt to this fragmented, multi-platform, multi-revenue stream, fragmented world. And that's clearly disruptive. And the prediction here is that in the education industry, they will have the same issue. And for every single little raindrop of revenue that those players will miss, there will be an opportunity for an innovator to flourish. So that was the audience side. And now I want to talk about the outcome part. And it's a very important aspect, because in some extent, people will say that the link between efficiency and spend is broken. It was true in the case of media until digitalization came, and it's true today in education. If you want to be cynical a little bit about education, you could say that the only measurable outcome of education in the past 3 decades, and education has been in a spending spiral over the last 3 decades, so the outcomes will be in the US, 12 digits student debt, $1 trillion, which is more than the credit card debt overall in the US. And in Europe, it's a double-digit youth unemployment. So those are the only really measurable outcome that we have. And I'm a bit cynical here, but there is really this notion that the link between efficiency and spend is broken. And what's great about digitalization is that it contributes to recreate one. And how it does that is by bringing data and analytics at the core of the system. Bringing new metrics to measure efficiency and measure outcomes. And again, pushing the parallel with the media industry, we have this notion of the next generation metrics. So if you look at what happened in the digital media, we got suddenly very efficient and measurable return on advertising, and Google AdWords is probably the best example of this, which was a truly measurable way to spend money on search engine and to get an understanding of what was the return on advertising. In terms of engagement metrics, if you think of Twitter hashtags and Facebook I like buttons, they are all measures of engagement and interaction from consumers and audience. And the same will happen in e-learning. We're going to see an all new set of tools to measure the efficiency of education. They have not been invented yet, but we're talking about return on education, we're talking about tools to measure personalized and smart learning, and we're talking about next generation metrics to measure lifelong learning. This is to come, and that will be very disruptive as well. And it's of paramount importance to recreate a link between spend and efficiency in education. So, I guess just to summarize things, media and education have a similar trail of disruption. First, provision of new content and new platforms, then fragmentation of audience, and then data and analytics finishing the disruption job by bringing new generation metrics which brush aside the old ones. So that's the path that education is following, and that's the same that the path that media followed. And the good news about this is that if that's true, if really education is following the path of media, then we have a huge growth opportunity in front of us in digital education. I quantify it at 50 times. And the way I do it is, if you look at global education, it's $4.2 trillion. The share of digital is 2%. If you look at the same ratios in media, it's 3%, so 30%, sorry, so 15 times. That's the good news about the opportunity ahead of us. There is a bad news, though. And the bad news is about two challenges. The first, which could be impediment to the growth of education and the growth of edtech. The first has to do with education giants. They are basically in a position where they have to cannibalize themselves or let someone eat their lunch. What I mean by this is they have pretty strong revenue streams from physical education, not digital education, and investing massively in digital education will cannibalize their existing revenue. As such, for them, it needs to be a managed process. They are in no rush to deploy massive amount of capital in the e-learning market. They will do in some extent, but it will be more tiptoeing than the massive investment. So then the question is where the innovation is coming from. And this is where we look at the European Innovator Challenge. And the challenge here is that we have counted more than 3,000 e-learning companies in Europe, which is extremely fragmented. And most of them are subscaled, most of them are monomarket, and most of them are undercapitalized. And to get back to Charles' point earlier, when we say undercapitalized, there is a ratio of 1 to 8 between the amount of money spent in education in the US and Europe. So there is really a problem here. And I think the idea of EdTech Europe is to create a platform to bring the players together. So what is this platform? Well, this platform is, together with IBIS, we have created Edxus Group, which is a corporate vehicle to consolidate the industry with a buy and build strategy, and the idea is to create a European e-learning champion. We have EdTech Europe, which is a platform, and that's the first event this year, and we hope to grow this, not only here, but in other countries, doing events, trends, and global networking. And then we have EdTech 20, which is our movers and shaker index, identifying young, emerging companies and trying to increase their visibility to the investor community. So that's what we're trying to do. We're doing that for business, but it's beyond business here. In education, whatever we invest in digital education today, will have some impact on our European competitive advantage in the future. And we should not also forget that, more than in any other sectors, investment in education has also social dividend. So, I would say join us, welcome, follow us, join the group, and we are here to try to build a strong EdTech Europe community and hopefully create European EdTech champions. Thank you very much.